Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Virtual House Church. I am your host, Rob Skiba. Sorry for the audio glitch there at the beginning. You know, every time Windows decides to do an update, it jacks up all my settings, and I have to go back in and redo them again. But anyway, we'll jump in here and get started. I am still waiting for my co-hosts to join me. They haven't yet responded to anything that I've sent them. So we will see what happens again today. And in the meantime, if you go to virtualhousechurch.com, virtualhousechurch.com is our website. Let me switch over here. It's a website that was started back in 2012 and 13. It's in the process of getting a complete overhaul, and I'm updating it sort of week by week as we go along here. And almost got the whole thing done. All the links in the left-hand menu here all the way down to this week's study, which is Numbers Week 40, will take you to the new website. So, for instance, go up here, click on who we are. Takes us to the new About Us page. It tells you a little bit about Sheila and I, what we're about here. And below that is the Virtual House Church store, where you can get a number of things. You can click on the pictures here for the calendars. This is the calendar put together by Kevin and Amanda Roberts. It takes you to a free PDF that you can view and download for yourself. If you'd like a printed copy, you can click here and go to their website and order it that way. Below that is the calendar put together by Juan Carlos. Same thing. Click on that for a free PDF. It's different. It renders the Moedim, or the appointed times, slightly differently than Kevin and Amanda's does. And, you know, we present both of them here for you to pray about it and see which one you believe is correct, or if either of them are correct. None of us are claiming the corner on truth here. All of us are just doing the best we can with what we understand from the scriptures. And there are lots of different opinions on how to keep the Hebrew calendar. So, we're doing the best we can. Below that are the Torah study workbooks that you can get on Amazon if you're interested individually, or if you'd like to save some money and get them all together as a package deal, you can get them through us. If you'd like to get them instantaneously, you can click on that right there and get the PDF version of it. I will say that I am caught up on all of my orders, so if you haven't yet received yours, be patient. You're waiting on the post office. It is in the mail. Below that is the Ephraim Awakening DVD-ROM. Contains all the resources you see there, including the Torah study workbooks in PDF format. And then we have our Statement of Faith. That's what we believe here at the Virtual House Church. You can go through that. And then after that, we have the Defending Messiah page, which is a very comprehensive web page. Just what it sounds like. Designed to defend the Messiah, that Yeshua is the Messiah. We believe here at the Virtual House Church that he is, in fact, the Messiah of Israel. And if you're viewing this, by the way, on a mobile device, anytime you see this picture right here, you can click on it and it takes you to a more mobile-friendly version of the website where you can, resize it for, like, if you're viewing on a tablet or something, it might look like that, or like this on a cell phone. So it's a lot more responsive. And while I'm thinking about it here, below this, I have the Virtual House Church Discord server. Go ahead and put the invite in the link for you here. Don't really care for the name too much, Discord, but the software is really cool. And so makes it possible for us to do some really nice interactions with people. And if you... Whoops, what is the deal here? Let me just switch that. There we go. More of a full view for you here. There are many different channels within our server here. So this is like general discussion right here. Below that is, we already had the logo competition. Then we have the Hebrew Learning Center here. If you're interested in discussing the Hebrew language and learning Hebrew better, you could go in there. Biblical cosmology, people are pretty active in there talking about that. Prayer closet, if you have prayer requests or praise reports, that sort of thing, that's a place you can put it right here. We are a body of believers here. Let's come together and help our brothers and sisters as the need arises. And you can use this as a resource right here for prayer requests and praise reports. What about Paul? There's a whole lot of discussion in here going on about Paul. Dietary discussions in here. And then below that, we have Torah singles. If you are single and looking for somebody to potentially get into a relationship with that shares your worldview, this might be a good place for you. But, I just posted this link here on YouTube, which anybody in the world can see and anybody in the world can click on. So as with anything else online, especially when you're thinking about something like this, proceed with caution, be prayerful, just be smart about it. But it's there as a resource for you. And then below that are text channels where you can get in there, and it's not just texting, but you can use your if you've got a webcam and a microphone, you can get in there and actually start having conversations with people. So lots of cool stuff for you to do in the Virtual House Church Discord server. And going back to our Defending Messiah page, I actually updated it yesterday, as a matter of fact, with some new information. And this page is all divided up into sections right here, and these are like chapter points or quick reference links that you can just jump down right to each section. This is the new one I added right here. How should we understand the Godhead? And that'll jump you right down to this video playlist right here. If you guys haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. I really thought it was outstanding. There are 6 videos in here total, so it'll take you some time to go through it. Of course, I watch and view everything in double speed, so I got through it quicker than most, but I've actually listened to it several times. I really, really like it, and I have to say I agree with it. So you want to understand how I understand it, the Godhead, this is a good playlist for you right there. Other things, the name of Yeshua, how we got Jesus from Yeshua and all that kind of stuff. So lots of information here, and really made an effort to try to defend Messiah primarily from the Torah and the prophets. Why? Because that's what he did. On the road to Emmaus, he was talking to these guys that didn't recognize him, and it says he began with Moses to tell them who he was, Moses and the prophets. And Paul was doing the same thing. In the end of the book of Acts, he's got a rented house, and he's beginning with Moses and the prophets to explain who Yeshua was. When the Bereans were searching the scriptures daily, they were not searching Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the epistles of Paul. They were reading the Torah and the prophets. So we here at the Virtual House Church believe that you need to be able to defend Messiah from the Torah and the prophets, and that's what I've attempted to do with this page right here. So lots of information for you to check out there. Coming Out of Babylon is another very comprehensive web page with a ton of information. What does it mean to come out of Babylon, to keep the Sabbaths and the feasts, and what's up with the feasts? How do we understand them? And so lots of books and video resources available for you on this page. You could easily spend a month here, and I recommend that you do. That's what it's there for. Torah Fellowship, this is a resource put together by 119 Ministries. It takes a few seconds for the widget here to load, but it will populate with all these tags right here. And let's see, let's go up. What's up there? Up here in Iceland here. There's one person out in Iceland here. The way it works, you click on this little tab right there, and Hedar is probably looking for some fellowship. So if you happen to live in that area, that's a good way to reach out and connect with them. Typically their contact information, mostly emails, but a lot of times even addresses and phone numbers are available there. So that's how it works. You just click on any of these tabs and the same thing. And of course, you live in the United States, there are a lot of them. So there's a pretty good chance that there's probably somebody within, I would say, an hour drive of where you live that is endeavoring to do the same thing we're doing here. And so if you're looking for a way to fellowship, that might be a resource for you. What about Paul? A lot of people who come here who think that we're heretics and don't believe in what we're doing here, they will try to quote Paul as a defense for what they believe. But I maintain that you shouldn't quote or read one thing that Paul wrote until you thoroughly understand what Paul studied and likely had memorized. Once you understand what Paul understood, the way Paul understood it, then go back and read and quote Paul. And you'll find that he takes on a whole new light for you. And these are some sort of frequently asked questions and issues dealing with Paul that I tried to address back in roughly 2013 through 15. Most of that stuff was written. And by the way, these links will take you to our sister website. I think I'm going to put a link, if I didn't, on the homepage. I don't remember if I put one on the homepage or not, but to the Ephraim Awakening website. This is a sister page or sister site to the Virtual House Church, where lots of blogs are here divided up into different categories. So a lot of good resources for you on this website. In fact, if you go to EphraimAwakening.com, just to the main page there, oops, I thought I did. Nope. Oh, I put it here. Here's the link for Virtual House Church. So you click on that, and then you see these pictures again. So these, if you happen to go to Ephraim Awakening, you can get to Virtual House Church with these links, from the main menu here. And I probably need to put a link on the homepage for the Virtual House Church that will take you to the Ephraim Awakening site. Anyway, these are links that deal directly with Paul, and we got a whole section just dealing with the book of Galatians. Are you really a foolish Galatian for trying to obey Yahuwah? No. As even Peter, who wrote to the Galatians, said, and he actually warned people. He said, listen, man, there are ignorant and unstable people who twist and distort the writings of Paul, who he considered to be his writings, Peter considered to be scripture, in order to fall into the error of lawlessness. So Peter warns against using Galatians to say we don't need to obey Yahuwah anymore. Hebrew calendars, this page populates a little bit differently. You'll see some new stuff pop up here in the right-hand menu. Same thing, click on those for free PDF. Click there to order a printed copy. Below that are some other resources for you to check out regarding the Sabbaths and the feasts. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see a search window where you can search for keywords that will, this little widget will go search the website and see if there's anything there for you, whatever it is you're looking for. Below that is Yahuwah's love letter and Psalm 91 audio. If you haven't heard those, they will be a blessing to you, I promise you. Check those out. And Bible study tools that I enjoy are all right here. Links in the Aramaic Study Bible for you as well. Virtual House Church is a listener-supported ministry. We can't do what we do without people like you. So we certainly appreciate those of you who have supported us in the past. Sheila and I greatly appreciate it. Again, I'm not kidding you when I say we can't do this without the support of people helping us to do so, because this is what I do for a living. I'm a content producer. So if you'd like to support us, you can do so with that link right there, or send to this address right here. We definitely appreciate your support. And then below that are ministries that we enjoy. Your Living Waters, as Ardell's commentaries are fantastic. I'll talk about those again in a minute here. Torah Family is Steve Mutria, New to Torah, Zach Bauer. 119 Ministries, Unlearn is Lex Meyer and Jim Staley's teachings right there. All great resources for you guys to check out. All right. We click on this link right here. This is this week's study. So each week I update this and put the scripture readings. You can just click on this.
And Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites.
It will be
and Moab was in great
red for you there. And below that is the Parsha in 60 seconds. Parsha is the Hebrew word for study. Click on that, and they distill the Torah portion down to 60 seconds. We'll watch that in a minute here. And then the live stream, which is what we're doing right now, will archive here and remain on this page until I update it for next week's study. Below that is the click here for additional study notes. You click on that, takes you to our study page for this week. Same thing, click on this for mobile devices. Click here to read these scriptures for yourself on BibleGateway.com. Click here to have them read to you. And let's go ahead and watch the Parsha in 60 seconds, and we'll jump in.
Shalom and welcome to Parsha in 60 seconds. Today's portion is from Numbers 22:2, 25:9. It is called Balak. Balak, king of Moab, contacts the prophet Balaam to come and curse the Israelites. God comes to Balaam and says, you must not curse that people, for they are blessed. Balaam says no to Balak. Balak raises the offer. Balaam refuses, but God allows Balaam to go with Balak's men. Balaam takes his donkey and departed, but God places an angel in his way. The donkey saw the angel and was scared stiff. Balaam beats the donkey 3 times. God allows the donkey to speak.
Ouch! Why are you hitting me?
Then God allows Balaam to see the angel. Balaam bowed down to the ground. The angel questions Balaam and sends him with the men, instructing him only to speak the word of God. Balaam and Balak go to Karath Huzzah. In the morning they went up a mountain overlooking the Israelites. They built 7 altars, killed some bulls and rams. Then Balaam went off alone. God appears and tells Balaam he cannot curse what has been blessed. Balak tries a second mountain and still no curse. Balak then tries a third mountain and Balaam ends up blessing the Israelites. Balak fires Balaam for incompetence and Balaam goes home. Meanwhile, the Israelites party with the Moabite women, worshiping their god Baal Peor. Enraging God, God tells Moses to impale the ringleaders. Phinehas, son of Eleazar, spears one of the couples who were in a tent. 24,000 die as a result of their actions. And that is Balak in 60 seconds.
Ouch, why are you hitting me? Really enjoy watching these Parsha in 60 seconds. They have fun. You can tell they have fun making these right here. That's some good stuff. Below that are some studies we've done in the past. 2013 audio, 2014 From that point forward, we did videos, 2017, 2020, the one we're doing right now, studies done by others. This is the one done by the Way Biblical Fellowship, JP and Charlie's ministry there. And Ardell's commentaries, these are fantastic. Highly recommend that you click on those, download them, print them, put them in a notebook binder. You'll be glad you did. Some great insights there. And of course, there's lots of notes. And looks like I talked about the Jerusalem at the center of the earth video here. Some pretty cool stuff. So these are all notes from previous year's studies. So they go along with whatever we were talking about in those previous videos and studies right there. So as you can see, lots of stuff available for you on that page. All right, let's jump in here. I have with me Jake Grant and Juan Carlos. They have both joined us today. So, hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today, and looking forward to another exciting study together.
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Well, I've done enough talking already, so let's go ahead and jump in, man. Well, Jake, you're right beside me on the screen here, so we'll start with you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so for this week, kind of at home, we just kind of read through the Torah portion, and then I read through parallel with the Targum, and man, is there some interesting tidbits that are brought out in the Targum that actually kind of correspond with the book of Jasher in some ways. So we have this character, Balaam, and he is the son of Beor, according to the text. But I did a little bit of digging, and I realized that Beor is likely the son of Laban, who Jacob went and worked for, and he married Jacob's daughters, Rachel and Leah. Wow. And he also had a son, and one of those sons was Beor, who became the father of Balaam. And so,
wow, so he's still jacking with him.
Yes. So there's going to be a really, really interesting tidbit in this Torah portion that's recorded in the Targums that actually does a callback to the promise between Jacob and Laban not to mess with each other. You remember, Laban goes after Jacob looking for his idols, and we've known from previous discussions that idol was actually a shrunken head, which historically they would put like a coin in the mouth of a shrunken head, and that's how they would get these spirits to prophesy to them. And it was likely that the idol that Rachel took, and when Jacob left and he took his wives and his sons with them, that idol that Laban went to go and collect, and he was so angry, he came after them, and he searched everywhere, and Rachel sat on it and was like, hey, it's my monthly time, don't bother me. And he didn't search underneath her, and that's how they kind of escaped that predicament. But after that kerfuffle, right, Jacob sits down with Laban, and they create a covenant or a pact, and they make these boundary stones. And so here we're going to fast forward in time back to our Torah portion here about Balaam and this guy who is being called to curse the children of Israel, right? And so right off the bat, I wanted to kind of tap in on that and some heritage, the likely heritage to Balaam being like, that makes him the uncle of Israel or something.
Actually, Jake, that's fantastic, because I was watching the broadcast we did on the same portion last year, and one of the points I shared back then is that I was looking for a connection between Balaam and the Yitzhak and so on and the family, because I was able to see a connection, but no finding the evidences, because Balaam was coming from Aram Naharaim, the same place that the Rivka was living. So most probably they were relatives or they know each other. So what you're bringing now is fantastic, because it's connected to exactly what we discussed last year.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah. It doesn't end there. There's actually some more interesting connections to other biblical characters that we know from other stories in the Torah. And this next connection, I'm going to share on my screen here so you guys can see behind me. And this is, of course, the pseudo Jonathan Targum, but And it says this, and Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his ass and went with the princes of Moab. But the anger of the Lord was provoked because he would go, that he might curse them. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way as an adversary to him. But he sat upon his ass, and his 2 young men, Jannes and Jambres, were with him. And the ass discerned the angel of the Lord standing in the way with a drawn sword in his hand. And the ass turned aside to the road to go into the field. And Balaam smote the ass to make her return unto the way. So just a quick pause here. Jannes and Jambres, you guys can see here, they are the 2 magicians that contended against Moses in Egypt when Moses came to ask Pharaoh to let his people go. It turns out that these 2 guys, Jannes and Jambres, are the sons of Balaam. So he's a generational kind of family affair between this son of Laban, who came from Beor, and then his sons end up being these like magicians in Pharaoh's court. And this is further backed up in the book of Jasher. And I wanted to show you guys that, because it just kind of brings a whole lot more drama to this whole exchange of him being called to curse Israel. And it says in Jasher chapter, let me see here. So Jasher chapter 79, verse 27, is where it very explicitly says that Balaam, the magician, so it says, and when they had gone, Pharaoh sent for Balaam, the magician, and to Jannes and Jambres, his sons, and to all the magicians and conjurers and counselors who belonged to the king, and they all came and sat before the king. So it's interesting to me that these guys previously had kind of an exchange with the children of Israel in the land of Egypt. And in Jasher chapter 70, it actually gives an account of Moses when he was a child. The whole place he gets his lisp from is when he was sitting next to Pharaoh. He pretty much grabbed the crown of Pharaoh, and the whole court was astonished and shocked. And Balaam, the son of Beor, he was the one who pretty much was like coming after Moses in that story. And I was just going to read that just briefly because it kind of sets up this drama for later on. And it says, in the 3rd year of the birth of Moses, Pharaoh was sitting at a banquet, and the queen was sitting at his right and Bathi at his left, and the lad Moshe was lying upon her bosom. And Balaam, the son of Beor, and his 2 sons, Jannes and Jambres, right? And all the princes of the kingdom were sitting at a table in the king's presence. And the lad stretched forth his hand upon the king's head, and took the crown from the king's head, and placed it on his own head. And when the king and princes saw the work which the boy had done, the king and the princes were terrified, and one man to his neighbor expressed astonishment. And the king said unto the princes who were before him, What speak ye, and what say ye, O you princes, in the matter of which the judgment against the boy on account of this act? And Balaam, the son of Beor, the magician, answered before the king and princes, and he said, Remember now, O my lord and king, the dream which you did dream many days since, and that which your servant interpreted unto you. Now, therefore, this is a child from the Hebrew children, in which the Ruach Elohim, let not my lord king imagine that this youngster did this thing without knowledge. So I just wanted to read that to you guys because all the way back to when Moses was an infant, you already had this guy, Balaam, who's probably well into his hundreds, during this exchange. Because if you think of it, if he was around with his sons while Moses was an infant, and Moses didn't leave the land of Egypt with the Israelites till his 80th birthday time frame, and of course he was in the wilderness for 40 years. That kind of paints a picture of how old these guys are. And so continuing on in the Targum portion here, this is what I wanted to bring out that ties in what we're reading here in the Torah portion with this promise between Laban and Jacob previously. And it says this, but the anger of the Lord was provoked because he would go, that he might curse them. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way be an adversary to him. But he sat upon his ass, and his 2 young men, Jannes and Jambres, were with him. And the ass discerned the angel of the Lord standing in the way with a drawn sword in his hand. And the ass turned aside out of the road to go in the field. And Balaam smote the ass to make her return unto the way. And the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path that was in the midst between vineyards. And this is what it says in the Jerusalem Targum. And the angel of the Lord was standing between 2 vineyards, a hedge being on this side and then on that side, in the place where Jacob and Laban raised the mound, the pillar on this side and the observatory on that side, which they raised, that neither should pass the limit to do evil to the other. And the ass discerned the angel of the Lord and thrust herself against the edge and bruised Balaam's foot by the hedge. So let's just full pause here. This is really just amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just cool because if he was a descendant of Laban, and this whole exchange here with the donkey, not going and him going to pronounce a curse on Israel happened in the midst of this location of that ancient covenant.
It's rather poetic because, the more you study things like this and fill in the blanks, Genesis is like a really high level, the whole Torah really is a very high level overview of a vast amount of time. It's the Cliff Note bullet point of like thousands of years, right? So it's really just trying to summarize the main point as best they can to get to the next point, but when we look into some of these other texts, and the Targums help to fill in some of these blanks, but Joshua and others, they elaborate, they go deeper than what we get. And what I found is like nothing is there without intent. Every time there's a little detail given, it's not irrelevant. That if a detail is given, it's there for a reason. And there's a lot of cyclical things where something happens and you circle back around and you're right back in the same spot again, and there's a point being made, and for a lot of these things to events to occur in significant places that already have precedence somewhere else, I just think that that's awesome. I love those kind of details. This is good stuff, man.
Yeah, I think bringing out just the long-standing relationship between Balaam and Israel really helps us understand why Balaam is used as an example later on in the book of Revelation as a warning for the church, because it's almost like a familial thing. He's like the long-lost uncle, and his descendants, Jannes and Jambres, are these mighty magic workers, right? They're the ones who were recreating the curses, the plagues of Egypt in front of Pharaoh to harden Pharaoh's heart to do what? To not let the children of Israel go. And what we see that Balaam eventually is kind of credited with doing is that he teaches Balak to cause the Israelites to fall into sin. So he in a way, you see this consistent narrative that it follows these guys, is that they harden the hearts of God's people to sin, and they, not only God's people, but Pharaoh, the I guess Egypt, you could say the world is hardened; their hearts are hardened by these guys as well. But Revelation 2:14, in addressing one of the church of Pergamos, says, "But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold to the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication." And so, this guy Balaam, he's a mighty, sorcerer. He can even hear the voice of God, right? That's what's so, kind of interesting about this story, because whenever you think about it, this guy was somebody who lived among the pagans. He wanted the admiration of these kings of Moab and Ammon, and he was kind of, how can this guy hear the voice of God? And so with that in mind, and also who his sons were, Jannes and Jambres, who would work these miracles, they would work these signs and wonders. it made me want to kind of demonstrate who these people are that Revelation 2:14 is addressing. And in Matthew, chapter 7, pretty much perfectly describes this group of people who they hear the voice of God, they do mighty miracles, they do mighty wonders, they can even bless Israel, right? But then again, we have a pretty explicit call to identity, I guess. So Matthew 7:21 says, "Not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven." So with the story of Balaam, God didn't want him to curse Israel. And instead, he seemed pretty determined to go and curse Israel. And so, despite an angel literally being in the way, and the donkey having to talk to him, telling him, you're doing the wrong thing, man. You're on your way to curse Israel. He still ends up in front of the king, and he still ends up making these sacrifices to, appease God and try to get a different answer than what he already knew, that Israel couldn't be cursed. And so this is what we're seeing in Matthew 7:22 is, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? Balaam prophesied in the name of God. And in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. And then I'll profess to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Therefore, whoso heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house upon a rock. And when the rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat upon the house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of point out to you guys, just in a kind of a cross application sense, who in modern day Christianity, modern day, the world, who would exhibit these characteristics of Balaam and his sons Jannes and Jambres. These guys who they're doing these things in the name of God. They were even blessing Israel, but at the same time they were kind of opposed to God's plan. They were miracle workers. Jannes and Jambres were magicians, and in the end times, we're going to see people who are falling to this doctrine of Balaam and probably doing a lot of things similar to what they were doing. They're going to be doing many mighty miracles and works and prophesying, but it's the lawlessness that ends up making them separate from the people of God versus part of the people of God. So anyways, there's a couple other really interesting things. We can take a pause there if you guys want. There's actually 10, I think it was several things that were mentioned along with the donkey being given the ability to speak, that is mentioned in the Targums. And I'll show you guys here. This was interesting to me. And it says, and the ass saw the angel of the Lord and fell under Balaam, and Balaam's wrath was strong, so that he smote the ass with his staff. And then it says this, 10 things were created after the world had been founded at the coming in of the Sabbath between the suns. So I'm guessing that means, sometime between Friday and Saturday, these particular things are special things that have happened since creation. And it mentions that the manna was one of those things. The well, I'm assuming with one of the patriarchs, it says the rod of Moses, the diamond, I'm not sure what that is, the rainbow, the cloud of glory. So we got the rainbow. I guess the covenant with Moses or with Noah was, it appeared on that in this time frame. It says the cloud of glory appeared, the mouth of the earth, the writing of the tables of the covenant, the demons, and the speaking ass all happened on a Friday, I guess is what the Targums is mentioning. So I just wanted to point that out as a peculiar thing that I'm curious at what that is indicating and what that's kind of leading into with these various things mentioned.
When was Shrek created?
Shrek?
That's what I always think about when I think of donkey, the talking donkey.
Does that make Shrek Balaam?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, right.
Interesting.
Yeah, you never know. Regarding the Targums, there's that playlist that I told you I just added to the Defending Messiah page. I'll just go ahead and put a link for the entire playlist right now into the chat room for people to check out. But in the second video, beginning, I think about 4 minutes into this second one right here, he does a pretty good brief history of the Targum, Jonathan specifically, talking about who that character was, like who was Jonathan, and why should we give it any weight or authority at all. Really good. So if you hadn't checked it out, I'm not gonna play it here, but I actually aired that part of it on the Quest for Truth show that I did with Zen this past Wednesday. I played about 20 minutes of it there, but you guys could check it out in its entirety. But it's in the second one right there where it gives that history right there. So it's pretty cool.
I got to check that out. Cool.
Yeah, good stuff, man. So you have anything else on this week's Torah portion and or Prophets New Testament?
I think there was at least one more interesting thing in the Targums. Let me just find it real quickly.
And for those, while you're looking, for those who are wondering, Targum is just the Hebrew word for translation. So it's different from Talmud. The words sound the same, but for people who are not familiar with the terminology, we hear Talmud or we hear Targum, and a lot of times people associate that with Talmud. No, not the same thing. Two different things.
Yeah.
Targum.
People will think that we are using Talmud.
Right.
Yeah.
No. We are not Talmudists. We're not Kabbalists. We're not into any of that kind of stuff.
Especially reading the chat room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we use Hebrew words and stuff that people aren't familiar with, and there's certain things that we've been taught, and we have sort of these preconceived ideas. So I just wanted to clarify, Targum just means translation. So the Septuagint was a Targum. The King James Bible, or any English translation, or Spanish, or any other translation for that matter, is a Targum. However, whenever you typically hear the word used, Targum, it's usually specifically in reference to the Aramaic Targums, and that's how we're using it here.
Yeah, if I were to describe it in terms of content to somebody and compare the different various Targums or translations out there, if you were to look at the Aramaic Targums and the amount of information, compare it and its information to like a 6-sentence paragraph, and then if you were to look at the Septuagint, it would be like a 4-sentence paragraph. And then if you were to look at the Masoretic text, which is where we get our King James Bible translated from, it's like a 3-sentence paragraph. And whenever you come to understand that the Masoretes and those who translated, the later Targum, the Masoretic text, that group, vast majority of them were not Christians. And so they had kind of a propensity to remove things from the text or change things from the text to fit their traditions and their, particular theology or whatever. And that's where we lose phrases like the word of the Lord, which is found commonly in the Targums. And also you have different things like, the Masoretes, they decided to remove the name, Yod-He Vav-He, and replace it with all caps, the Lord, when they translated for the King Jimmy. And so, all these are kind of things to consider. And that's why I like reading the Targums, because like I said, it's like reading a 6-sentence paragraph compared to the 3-sentence paragraph, which is the Masoretic text in the English. But this last thing that I'll share with you guys, it kind of breaks down a little bit more of the drama here at the end of the Torah portion with you have Balaam. He blesses Israel because he can't speak anything else. God won't let him curse Israel, which in a way he was kind of keeping the covenant between Jacob and Laban, his forefather. But then you have him teaching Balak to go and set up pretty much these hostels that served really cheap food. And the Targum actually talks about how they would set up a place where they would sell alcohol, and they would sell them sweet meat sold for cheaper than it was worth. And this enticed the Israelites to come in and commingle with the prostitutes or whatever. And that's kind of what led the children of Israel to curse themselves, which then opened them up to, consequences to their own sins, since nobody could curse them unless they cursed themselves, pretty much is how that works. But at the very end of the Torah portion, it discusses Phinehas, and Phinehas, the one who is well known for skewering the man caught in adultery with the Midianite woman. But just to set up some of the drama here, it's interesting. And behold, it says here in the Targums, I'll show you guys here on the screen behind me. Behold, a man of the son of Israel came holding a Midianitess and brought her to his brethren in the sight of Moshe and all the congregation of the children of Israel. And he answered and said to Moshe, what is it that is wrong to have company with her? If thou sayest it is forbidden, didst thou not thyself take a Midianitess, the daughter of Jethro? So, we kind of wonder, how is Moses letting these things go on? And he's being confronted with his own past. Now, of course, and it says, they stood at the door of the tabernacle of the ordinance, and Phinehas, who is the son of Eleazar, who is the son of Aaron, the high priest, saw and remembered the ordination and answered, he who ought to kill, then let him kill. Where are the lions of the tribe of Judah? And when they saw, they were quiet, and he arose from the Sanhedrin, which is kind of the elders, and took a lance in his hand. And then the Targums mention 12 miracles that happened along these lines of Phinehas standing up to confront and stop the sin in the midst of the camp. And it says this, the 12 miracles were wrought for Phinehas at the time that he went in after the man of Israel with the Midianite. The first sign was that he would have parted them, but could not. So I guess he goes in there, tries to stop them, but they didn't want to stop. Then it says their mouths were closed, that they could not cry out, for had they cried out, they would have been rescued. The third miracle is, he says, he drave the lance through both of them, and the lance remained fixed in the wound. And then he bare them aloft. The lintel was uplifted for him until he had gone forth, and he carried them through the whole camp 6 miles without fatigue.
What?
And it says he held them up by his right arm in the sight of their kindred, who had no power to hurt him. And then it says the lance was made strong so as not to be broken with the load, and the iron transpierced them, but was not withdrawn. And an angel came and made bare their corpses in the sight of the people, and they lingered alive till they had been carried through the entire camp, lest the priest in the tabernacle should be defiled by the dead. And their blood thickened so as not to flow upon him. But when he had borne them through the camp, it brake forth, and they died. Okay, so a little bit more graphic and gruesome, of course, than what we were reading in our in Numbers. But what it details here is some really interesting things, that Phinehas literally, pierces these people who were committing a sin in the midst of the camp, kind of in direct rebellion to God. And he's so zealous, I guess you can say, that he carries them all the way through the camp alive, to present them, before the elders, which is quite gruesome. And but just
like Vlad the Impaler.
Exactly. But Phinehas, the zealous priest of the Most High, right? But I wanted to kind of walk through this with people, because whenever we read through stories like this in the Torah portion, people who are just now starting to study into the scriptures, they can be like, wow, that was really extreme. Like, how could that be a good thing? Why would God want somebody to act so extremely? Just to point out the most obvious, because of the sin of the people, a plague had broken out and was wiping out thousands and thousands of people. So just the outside, consequence of sin, they allowed a pestilence to go through and was, probably some type of like STD is, what is a likely thing, because it was the people who were transgressing, the people who were sinning with these daughters of the pagan nations. These are the ones that, were, dying. But Phinehas, to look at Phinehas, it's an important story because it teaches us the seriousness of sin in the camp of God. That in a modern medical sense, I like to use the example of cancer. If somebody goes and they find out at the doctor that they have cancer, then that can't, if they are able to, the most efficient way to deal with cancer is to completely cut it out of the body, just so it doesn't spread. And if cancer is contained enough to where it's not spreading through the different organs, then, just cutting it out can keep that body alive. And cancer is dealt with so severely. It's like, you get a melanoma on your skin, you go to the doctor and they burn that thing off, or they cut it off so that it doesn't spread to the rest of the body. And in this context with Phinehas going and, doing this gruesome act, but showing his zealousness to keep the camp of God, free from sin, is the same way that, as believers, as people today, we should treat sin with that seriousness. Just like Phinehas goes and he skewers those people and he gets rid of that sin in the camp, so shall we just, treat sin in our life like a cancer to go and, scoop out, and what that will do is it'll allow your body to live. Spiritually, the body will thrive and live when there's not sin being condoned and blatantly blasted in the middle of the camp. And so that's kind of the spiritual significance to this, kind of crazy scene. Sometimes you read through some of this stuff and you're like, wow. But I also found it interesting that Phinehas was the son of Eleazar. Now, this is the guy who's in line for the high priesthood, the high priest. And one of those, miracles it mentioned was how he didn't get blood on him, and that the people didn't actually die, so that the priesthood wouldn't be defiled. So it was almost like these many miracles were happening in the midst of him, going through. But anyway, so that was just some of the discrepancies, the interesting things I found in this other translation that I wanted to share with everybody, and also kind of break down that story with Phinehas and how, that's the far unfortunate extreme from the doctrine of Balaam. The doctrine that, you can seek after the will of God. You can do mighty miracles. You can do, things in his name, like Balaam blessed the children of Israel in the name of Yah. But they also were going after their own heart, their own pleasures or whatever. And he was showing them, just like how Israel sinned by being tempted by worldly things like good food and beautiful women, and fell into idolatry through those things. In the same way, those things can be things that we need to be careful not to let lead us astray, so that we don't end up being those Matthew chapter 7 type of people that have been doing these mighty works and done magician type stuff. It's different from everyone, but definitely there's a little bit of showmanship in some places to bring people to the truth of God's word. But at what loss? Are you teaching against the commandments? Are you teaching against obedience to God's word? And when you pair disobedience with all the miraculous things, the things that kind of swoo and sway you, then that's where you get this manifestation of Balaam and the doctrine of Balaam in today's world and in today's body of Christ.
Stuff. All right, man. Thank you. And Juan Carlos, yeah, man, what are your thoughts on this week's Torah portion, prophets and New Testament?
Yeah. Just to complement to what Jake said a few minutes ago, it's interesting to know what's the connection that the Targum is bringing about Balaam. But even if we consider the situation of the Midianites, that they were part of everything that happened during the Torah portion, and we consider that the Midianites somehow were connected to Israel through Abraham, because they were descendants of Abraham, according to what is written in Genesis, there is a bigger picture there, that basically relatives of Israel were being stumbling blocks for Israel continuing to the promised land, to the final purpose. So it's amazing. Just to complement what you said, JK, it's amazing to see this thinking that way. How, let's put it like this: a close relative or even family could be used in this way in order to stop our progress in the way of Yahuwah. And just came to my mind what was said by the Yahushua HaMashiach about what's going to happen on the end times. It's exactly that, father against son, son against father, and so on. So it's just amazing for me to see the connection in the word of Yahuwah, that even from the very beginning, we see these kind of situations happening. And regarding Phinehas, that his name in Hebrew, just to complement also what you said, even with this situation, he got a blessing, and we will read about this in next portion, I think. So I think the message you brought, Jake, at the end is so important for us to remember, especially on the days that we're living, that we need to be zealous as Phinehas in order to get the blessings of Yahuwah. What it means that we're not going to go and take the spear and start punching people. No, it's not like that. It's, while you were reading, I remember the words of Mashiach that are recorded in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 29 and 30, and it says the following: "And if your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you. But it is better for you that one of your members perish than for your entire body to be thrown into the Gehinnom. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away from you. But it is better for you that one of your members perish than for your entire body to be thrown into Gehinnom." So was Yahushua literally speaking that we need to cut our hands or we need to take out our eyes? Not at all. It's basically removing sin from our bodies, from our lives. And in the same way that you perfectly presented, Jake, as Phinehas did it during this situation and this matter of Peor. I saw that comment from Karen in the chat, that the situation that happened, as written in the chapter 25, this matter of Peor is written all throughout the scripture. So the situation was so terrible at the eyes of Yahuwah that that's why I think what Phinehas did was so right at the eyes of Yahuwah. That's why he received a blessing. So the same thing, is applicable to us as we understand the words of Yahushua. That if we see sin in our lives, we need to be zealous in order to remove it. Whatever it takes, we need to do it. And I think for these times is so important to believe in that way, because we are going always through struggles and situations are getting very difficult. And just to share something, yesterday, and most probably you guys saw it already, I saw a video that is circulating in the internet. I don't know if it's already still available, about the title, just not to be precise. The title is a group of men singing, saying, "We are coming for your children." And when I'm saying men, I don't want to mention exactly the word is men, in quotation marks. That the message is so terrible that basically we see how the world is going crazy and how sin is spreading every place. And we need to be so attentive and so focused to understand if sin is around us, is around our families, in order to be a protector in the same way that the Phinehas was, in order to remove the plague. And in this time, I think it's a so important message for all of us to be with our eyes open, understanding the word of Yahuwah, what sin is, what's the will of Yahuwah, what needs to be our focus, and especially to keep our eyes open to everything that's going on, and to put our focus on our north, to the destiny, the New Jerusalem, the kingdom of Yahuwah. And in order to do that, we need to continue in the straight way, in the straight path. So I think the examples that you were bringing, Jake, and also what we see here in the portion, is something that is speaking directly to us in order to be strong and stay in the rock, in Yahushua HaMashiach. So, before sharing what I failed to share today about this portion, just want to share some interesting story that happened to me, I think 2 weeks ago, something like that. I'm in a project in the south of my country. I had the chance to buy a field a few years ago, and I have this project on hold. And, I'm doing my best effort in order to try to have a place over there, and to move out of the city if I can do it. It's not easy, it's a big project, but I'm trying to do my best to do it. So I was in that place, and in one moment I had an experience that I was thinking that I was going to have a Balaam experience with a talking donkey. And why is that? Because I was doing some work over there, and I forgot to close the gate, and it's an open field, and there's some horses in the public route. It's at the countryside, so it's safe. It's not a big issue. And 2 horses entered the field, and I didn't notice this situation until very late in the night. It's a big field in some places, so I didn't see the horses until I was going out. So when I see the horses, I started to, I didn't know what to do, because I needed to close the gate, and I couldn't keep the horses in. I needed to get them out. So I needed to go out of the car, and I started to shout the horses and shout at them in order to make them feared and go out of the field. And they were running from one point to the other. It was a very crazy and funny situation for me and my wife. So in one moment, I don't know what happened to me, but I said, I'm gonna stop shouting, and I'm gonna start talking to these 2 animals. And I started to level down the tone of my voice, and I started to talk to them very peacefully. Talking to them, I need to go. I know you are hungry. I know that you don't have grass. I know that you have plenty of grass here. But you need to go out. I need to go as well. So go. I can open the gate again another day, and you can come and you can eat whatever and how much you want. And what happened was very curious, because the 2 horses stopped. They were so relaxed, and in one moment, one of the horses, I was 50 centimeters from 1 meter from one of the horses, stopped and turned the head toward me and started to look at me without doing nothing. At the moment, they were so quiet. And in one moment, I thought, oh, I'm going to have a Balaam moment. I was expecting the horses to talk to me.
You're like, okay, dude, chill out, man. We'll help you.
Yeah, we will go.
Juan Carlos, the horse whisperer.
Yeah, exactly. It was so funny. We were talking with my wife after that, because she was in the car and she saw the whole situation, and she was expecting the horses to talk to me. At the end, the horses didn't talk. I started to shout again, and at the end, they went out. But it was so funny because I remember the story. But, it was interesting as well, because animals, and we talked about this last year, animals understand.
They do
understand our voice and understand what we say. So it's so
do.
important that how we treat them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have the ability to learn languages, like, whether you're speaking Spanish or English or whatever, they understand it. They'll pick it up. That's what's amazing to me. And like, I don't know if you ever had any birds, but like, that's the weirdest thing to me is birds talking. and growing up, I always had parakeets, growing up, and some of them, my grandmother, bless her heart, she's gone on to be with the Lord now, but she was a talker. She was one that could talk and talk and talk, and especially after my grandfather died, So here's this parakeet locked in this trailer home with my grandmother who likes to talk a lot. So this parakeet like picked up a massive vocabulary, just incredible vocabulary, and would actually have and hold conversation with you. You could it would understand what you were saying, and ask you questions and respond to questions that you ask it. Like, it was freaky, like how much this thing could do. And that's a tiny little parakeet with a brain that, how big's a parakeet's brain? And I had a parrot in my previous marriage. My ex-wife had this parrot. I think I may have even shared this in the last year's show, but they're very territorial and they get very jealous. And she had this parrot before I came into the picture. And so after I did come into this picture, that parrot was very jealous of me and did not like me. And we had this intense rivalry between the two of us. And like, this bird, like, he knew what would annoy me, and he would go, "What you doing, huh? What you doing, huh? What you doing, huh?" And he would just keep saying it. "What you doing, huh? What you doing?" Like, he'd drive me crazy. And my ex, she's like, "Just tell him what you like." I was working on this VCR, I was trying to fix it, and I'm like really intense trying to figure out what's wrong with this VCR, and I'm working on it. And this thing, "What you doing, huh? What you doing, huh? Shut up!" She says, "Well, just tell him what you're doing." I said, "I'm working on the VCR, Frankie." He goes, "Okay." So like, these things, man, they know they can communicate. I think in the garden, Adam had regular conversation with them, and I think that part of the fall, I think so. There's some sort of severance in our communion with nature in general, but certainly with the animals, where we no longer have the ability to converse with the animals like I believe Adam probably could. But they still understand. And anybody who has, dogs, cats, or, domesticated animals, I mean, even ferrets and literally everything. I mean, people that I know, you've had all kinds of different pets, and I have as well. If you spend any time with them, they pick up, they understand. So yeah, man, I'm with you on that. And
it was so funny. It was so funny, Rob. And actually, last year, since I saw the show from last year, we were discussing that in the book of Jubilees, it says that the animals in the garden used to speak, and Yahuwah shut their mouth. So I do believe that this will come in the New Jerusalem. We will be able to interact with animals, and that's why some passages that I think is in the book of Isaiah. It says that the lion will be pasturing with the sheep, and the kids are going to be able to play with cobras and things like that. So I think all this peace will come because we will be able to interact with animals in the same way that this happened in the garden. So we can have a glimpse of what that situation is when we have this kind of encounters with animals, like the one that I was sharing. So it was funny.
Yeah. So
almost having an experience like the talking donkey.
Well, we talked about how many times we said that life seems to imitate whatever the Torah portion is. So, especially, whatever we're reading about this Torah portion, that sort of thing wouldn't surprise me if it actually, did happen.
That's true. So regarding, the story and the portion itself, there are many things we discussed last year about the trials that we can go out. I was sharing back then the 3 times that is basically a kind of warning to Balaam, that is a kind of a example to us when we are going going away from the way of Yahuwah in the same way that the Balaam was doing. We can have some heads up on the way in the same way that the donkey was given to Balaam. So I think I will invite everybody if they didn't see the last year the same portion to take a look, because I think we discussed important things with Kevin back then. Mm-hmm. So when I was reading the portion today, my eyes and thoughts were focused specifically in two things. And, it's going somehow aligned to what I saw happening in the chat today. And so Yahuwah knows why he put some thoughts in our hearts to share. So the first thing that pop up to me is basically what happened to Israel and what was the attitude of Balak. Basically, what we see here in the whole situation between chapter 22 and chapter 23 is persecution. Israel being persecuted. And why was the reason for that? And it is written here, I want to share it in the chapter 22 in Numbers, between verse 1 and verse 3, and it says the following: And the children of Israel set out and camped in the desert plains of Moab, beyond the Jordan of Jericho. And Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people, because they were many, and Moab was in dread because of the children of Israel. And let me continue reading, because let's read the verse 4 as well. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, Now this company is licking up all that is around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field. Now Balak, son of Zippor, was sovereign of the Moabites at that time. So Balak started to do all of this with the council of the Midianites and also the elders of Moab, in order to curse Israel for one reason. All of this, we can say this is in a summary, in just one word, is persecution. He was persecuting Israel. And why he did that, it was only because Israel was different, and especially it was because it was out of fear. He was exceedingly afraid, and that's why he decided to persecute Israel. So persecution is the thing that popped up when I was reading this morning, the portion and what we discussed here at home. And what's the connection I saw, and especially what's going on today, and that's why the connection, what I saw in the chat. First Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says the following: But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, set apart nation, a people for a possession, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. The King James translation, it says that we are a peculiar people. We are a different people. And we are among the nations in the same way that Israel in the desert, in the wilderness, was among different nations. And, even Esau didn't want them to let pass through their land. And they were going to fight with them, as we saw in the previous portion. The same thing we see here, Moab, because of fear, they were going to persecute this peculiar and special people. And why is that? Because they saw that Yahuwah was with them. And what's the connection I want to do is exactly what we are suffering and we are facing today, and what we are going to face even stronger, most probably in any time soon. That is because out of fear, because we are special people, because we are a different people, persecution will come, and we need to be prepared for that. And when I was thinking on this, just to do the parallel of this portion to our days, I was thinking on what Yahushua said to the disciples, and this is recorded in the book of John, chapter 15, verse 18 to 21. And I think this is something that needs to encourage us. Every time that we read the words of our Melech, our King, our Mashiach, especially when we're living in this kind of situation. It could be persecutions that we're living today because of the craziness of the world. It could be persecution at the personal level. It could be persecution at work. It could be persecution at the family level. And persecution related to, because we are different people, because we believe something different that people sometimes they don't understand. Because people see that maybe we are being blessed by Yahuwah in different ways, only because we have peace in our heart, because we have joy in our heart. That could open the attention of other people that don't understand what's going on with us, and that could cause persecution. So it doesn't matter the kind of persecution. I think we need to remember the words of Yahushua HaMashiach when he was saying, and it's written here in John chapter 15. So it says the following, starting in the verse 18. It says, if the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, for that reason the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they shall persecute you too. If they have guarded my word, they would guard yours too. But all this they shall do to you because of my name, because they do not know me who sent me. They do not know him who sent me. So Yahushua HaMashiach is saying, you are not going to be greater than me in this situation. If I was persecuted, you are going to be persecuted as well, because they don't know him, Yahuwah Elohim, who has sent me. And what's the reason? Because we are not of the world. That's why the world, out of fear, because they don't know what we believe, they don't know in whom we believe, they are going to persecute us. And there is an amazing promise, and there is a connection also to this portion, what is written in the book of Matthew, Matthew in Hebrew, Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 to 12. And it says the following, blessed are the peacemakers, because they shall be called sons of Elohim. Blessed are those persecuted for righteousness' sake, because theirs is the reign of heavens. Blessed are you when they reproach and persecute you, and falsely say every wicked word against you for my sake. Rejoice, and that's the part that we need to grasp and hold fast. Rejoice and be glad, because your reward in the heavens is great. But in this way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And the parallels and the correlation to the portion for me is direct in this case, because we see Israel being persecuted in this portion. Balak trying to curse Israel through Balaam. And also the Midianites trying to do something in order to make Israel fall. Unfortunately, they accomplished to do it, and that's why the plague came to some of the people. But we see that not all the people fall, and Yahuwah was blessing all the time through Balaam. He turned the curse in a blessing. So if we follow the righteousness of the kingdom of Yahuwah, as Yahushua mentioned, and we understand what righteousness is, that will cause persecution. And we need to be very prepared for that. And how we prepare for how we can be prepared for that, understanding that our Mashiach is our best example, and he went through persecution, as he said. And we need to keep his words saying that we need to rejoice, because if we face this kind of persecution in the same way that he faced, and in the same way that Israel faced, we are going to receive a blessing. What was the blessing of Israel? That Yahuwah was blessing them in all the moment. And at the end, they were able, that generation, the second generation, not the first generation that they were disobedient and they were rebels and they died in the 40 years in the wilderness, they didn't receive the blessing. It was their children, the second generation, that is part of the story of this portion. They were receiving the blessings of Yahuwah, and they inherited finally the promised land. In the same way that they did it, if we are obedient to the word and we stay strong, understanding that we can face persecution, but we stay strong in the righteousness of Yahuwah, we are going to get the same blessings. So, I don't know what happened, that this pop up to me in this portion, and I think it's so important to mention, especially after what I saw in this video I was sharing from yesterday. When I see what's going on in the world, and also when I was checking the chat today, we need to be prepared for every situation. So somehow connected to this, and this is something that can sound easy to understand or basic mostly, but I never noticed in this way. In the whole story of Balaam and the donkey, we see that, it is written that, and let's read it. If you can put it in the screen, Rob, the chapter 22, verse 22. Let's read it from there onwards. It says, but the displeasure of Elohim burned because he went, and the Malach Yahuwah, the messenger of Yahuwah, stationed himself in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. And the donkey saw the Malach Yahuwah, the messenger of Yahuwah, standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam struck the donkey to turn her back onto the way. Then the Malach Yahuwah, the angel or the messenger of Yahuwah, stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards, with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yahuwah, she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. And the messenger of Yahuwah went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn aside, right or left. And when the donkey saw the messenger of Yahuwah, she lay down under Balaam. So Balaam's displeasure burned, and he struck the donkey with his staff. And we see in the next passages the entire interaction with this talking donkey. That was complaining why she was getting struck by Balaam, and Balaam saying, answering, and so on. So the point that I didn't notice in the past, and it caught my attention today, is that Balaam was not able to see. His eyes were totally shut. He was blind. Opposite to the donkey has her eyes open. This donkey was able to see the messenger of Yahuwah, but Balaam was totally blind. And what's the point that I felt, and the point that I want to share today is that basically, in the same way that the donkey, and I don't want to compare us to a donkey, but that's basically the point that I saw. In this case, the donkey tried to do everything she can in order to save Balaam, in order to warn Balaam about that something wrong was happening, that an angel, the Malach Yahuwah, the messenger of Yahuwah, was there in order to kill him. But Balaam was blind. He was not able to see what was going on. And his reaction was against the situation. So what's the point? We can encounter similar situations in our lives, in our walk. We can try to do our best efforts in order to try to open the eyes of the people, to receive the truth, to understand the same thing that we have been able, by grace, by favor, to understand. But in that way, we're going to be acting most probably like the donkey. And then we will encounter the situation that every time that we try to open the eyes of the people, we will face the same situation that the donkey faced in this case, that she got struck, she got persecuted. So when a person is blind, whatever we can do, we are not going to be able to open their eyes. Why? Because it's not our responsibility. It's not our job to do it. Our job, or the purpose, is to bring the warning, is to bring the righteousness, is to bring the light. But we are not the one opening the eyes. So sometimes if we're feeling that we are hitting our heads into a wall all the times, we need to remember this, that our job and our responsibility is to bring the good news. As part of the good news is the righteousness, is the light of Yahuwah. But it's not our job to open the eyes. Whose job is? It is written in the same passage. If we go to the verse 31 of the chapter 22, it says the following. Then Yahuwah opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the Malach Yahuwah, the messenger of Yahuwah, standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and fell on his face. So who is the one that's going to open the eyes of the people? Is Yahuwah Elohim. In the same way that he opened my eyes, open your eyes at the right moment. That doesn't mean that we should not try to make the people understand the way. That doesn't mean that we should stop sharing the good news of the kingdom of Yahuwah. Not at all. We need to do it. It's part of our job. But we don't need to lose heart if we see that there is no reaction and there's not fruit. Who is the one bringing the fruit? Is Yahuwah Elohim. Who is the one opening the eyes? Is Yahuwah Elohim. And you know, when I saw it, it was so important because I think all of us has going through similar situations in our walk. We try to help people. We try to share the truth of Yahuwah with people, and there's no reaction. Maybe because they're still blind, and Yahuwah has not decided to open their eyes yet. It's not their time. And you know, when I was looking into it, I remember few examples, and there's an important examples like we see here that it was Yahuwah opening the eyes of Balaam in order to see the messenger, the Malach Yahuwah. There is a similar story in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 6. Just to reinforce the idea that is Yahuwah the one opening the eyes. 2 Kings, chapter 6, verse 15 to 18. So if you read this in context, it's basically the kingdom of Aram trying to fight with the house of Israel. The two houses were already separated. They were split. And the king of Aram was trying to fight against the house of Israel. But Elisha, the prophet, he was counseling or giving advice to the king of the house of Israel about what the king of Aram was trying to do. And the king of Aram, if you read this entire chapter in context, knew about this, and he was going to take captive Elisha and the prophets. So that's the context, just to understand the story and what we're going to read. And it says, starting in the verse 15, and the servant of the man of Elohim, the servant of Elisha, rose early and went out and saw an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, "Oh, my master, what do we do?" So an entire army in this place, they were just prophets, not soldiers. And they see them surrounded by this big army. So everybody could be afraid in the same way that maybe Israel could be afraid when the Balaam was trying to curse them, or when they were fighting with Sihon or Og, or maybe Moab and the Midianites trying to do something against them. So they were afraid as well. And the answer from Elisha, if we read the 16, it says the following, and he answered, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." You know, and this is faith. And this is what we need to do, especially in these crazy times we are living. And listen what is written in the verse 17. And Elisha prayed and said, "Yahuwah, I pray, open his eyes and let him see." And Yahuwah opened the eyes of the young man, and he looked and saw the mountain covered with horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Until, let's read, because this is interesting. In the verse 18 it says, and when they came down to him, Elisha prayed to Yahuwah and said, "Strike this nation with blindness, I pray." And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. So we see the marvelous work of Yahuwah here. What was needed in order to open the eyes of the servant of Elisha? Just praying and ask Father to open the eyes. But it's not us the one opening the eyes. What we can do for the people that are not able to see yet is to pray to Yahuwah to open his eyes. You know, Yahuwah opened the eyes of Balaam to see the messenger. Yahuwah can open the eyes of the servant to see that they were more than the army of Aram, that Yahuwah and the messengers of Yahuwah were in their side. Yahuwah opened our eyes, and Yahuwah can open the eyes of anybody that we can pray for his sight. And it's so important because, who was the one doing miracles, giving sight to the blind? It was Yahushua HaMashiach. So the connection there is so amazing. So what we can do in these cases, it is written in the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verse 18. What we can do in order to pray to open our eyes, how we can open the eyes. And there's an instruction here to the churches, and it's exactly written over here. I advise you to buy from me gold refined in fire, it says, so that you become rich, and white garments so that you become dressed, so that the shame of your nakedness might not be shown, and anoint your eyes with ointment so that you see. So if we believe that we are blind in some situation, if we believe somebody is blind to the truth of the word of Yahuwah, we need to pray for them. They need the ointment. And what's the ointment? In this case, it's the Ruach HaKodesh, in order to open their eyes. And there is another story about the same. And I'm sorry to be so repetitive in this thing, because I'm just sharing what I felt today, and I think it's so important, and it's because of something, When we see the entire story of Shaul, we are not going to read it, but you can do it by yourself in the book of Acts, chapter 9, verse 8 to 18, that Shaul Paul was blind, after the encounter in the route to Damascus. And what he did, he was fasting and praying. And that's why Ananias saw in a vision that he needed to go lay his hand over his head in order to receive sight. So if we believe that we are blind to some situation, and we believe that somebody needs to open their eyes, we need to pray to Yahuwah and ask him to open the eyes, our eyes, of the eyes of the people. But just a last warning, and we saw it there, in the process, no matter that we don't open the eyes, is Yahuwah the one doing it. In the process of trying to tell the truth or give heads up or warning to the people, we can get struck in the same way that the donkey was. So we need to be prepared for this kind of situation, but not be afraid, because Yahuwah is in our side. Just sharing an experience, and I was able to see an email from 2015. I was trying to close a deal, a personal deal back then. And I most probably shared this with my dad, and he sent me an email. This is the one that I was reading today. And he sent me an email sharing with me his concern that maybe I was going to do this deal, and I was going to be in a financial situation, a complicated financial situation. So he was very concerned about what was doing. And it was a very, very beautiful email from him trying to advise me and to think on what was doing and was the best or not. And I saw the answer, what I answered him. And my answer was straightforward. And it touched my heart because of some situations that I'm going through nowadays. It touched my heart in the way that I answered back by then. And I think that's not because I did it. It's because of what I wrote, guided by the Ruach Kodesh. I told my dad back then is that not to be afraid. I was feeling in this moment that is that deal, that business was I needed to do. So I said, I don't want to be afraid of tomorrow. Because I'm afraid of tomorrow, I'm gonna get stuck. I'm not gonna progress. I'm gonna stop my walk. So I need to progress. So I cannot be afraid. And I was saying to him, we cannot be afraid because he is the one providing everything. He is providing to our needs. And what I said at the end is that, he is the one opening doors and closing doors. If no matter that I'm feeling that this is what I need to do, if it's not his will, he is going to stop it somehow. This is what I wrote to him, and I was remembering the entire situation. I totally forgot this discussion with him by email, and at the end, what happened that everything got blocked. I didn't close this deal. Some situations happened on the way that I couldn't complete it. So everything, the close was shut, not because of me, because Yahuwah didn't open it. So how this example and this experience that I'm sharing with you is connected to what I shared just a minute ago. Being blind, it doesn't mean only blind to the truth of Yahuwah. It could be that we are blind to what's happening and what's going to come next. But in the same way, and again, not because I did it and I'm sharing this, because it's what should be our attitude. In the same way that I was sharing with my dad because of his concern, that we cannot be afraid. We need to trust in Yahuwah. But maybe we are not able to see now, but in the same way that the servant of Elisha, the prophet, he was afraid. And when his eyes were open and he was able to see that Yahuwah and the army of Yahuwah was supporting them, that needs to be our attitude, not to be afraid and to trust in Yahuwah, to put our will in Yahuwah and to do the will of Yahuwah, that he is going to be beside us. No matter that we are not able to see, in one moment Yahuwah will open our eyes and he will close the door or open the door. So I think that's exactly what the touch means, somehow connected to the story. The open of our eyes. Is Yahuwah the one in charge? Is the one that is going to help us? Last two things from my side regarding this portion is that, and it's connected to everything that I have shared so far. One of the blessings that Balaam was giving to Israel, there is a description that touched me so much because I felt it like it was talking to us in our days. And this is written in the verse 9 of the chapter 23 of Numbers. And it says the following. Actually, let me read from the verse 8 and 9. Verse 8, it says, "How do I curse whom El has not cursed? How do I rage at whom Yahuwah has not raged? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I observe him." And listen to this, because this is the phrase that touched me. "Look, a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations." And when I was reading this, for me, this is a perfect description of all of us, that we are gathering together here in Virtual House every Shabbat. Other the brothers and sisters that maybe they are not gathering with us in Virtual House Church, but they are keeping the way of Yahuwah. This is, for me, is a perfect description of who we are. We are a people dwelling alone, and we're dwelling alone among the nations. We are not being reckoned among the nations. We are not a country. We are different people living in different parts of the world, that we are living according to laws and righteousness being set in the word of Yahuwah, not set by men, not set by women. And among the nations, we are these special people that Peter was talking about. And this blessing was given to that second generation that Balaam, or Balak, using Balaam, was trying to curse. And that description is so applicable to all of us, that we need to, with the more certainty, we need to understand that we are a new generation of Israel. And in the same way that the Israel of the past were not reckoned among the nations, they were people dwelling alone. The same thing is happening to us, that we are in the wilderness of the people in this world. But in the same way that Israel was blessed in the past, we are also blessed by Yahuwah. And that needs to be our hope. that needs to be our truth. You know, it is written in the book of Micah. Let me look for this. Connected to this portion, I think this is part of the Haftarah. In the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 5, it says the following. My people, Yahuwah speaking to us, my people, remember, please, what Balak, sovereign of Moab, counseled, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered him, from Shittim to Gilgal. In order to what? In order to know the righteousness of Yahuwah. What Yahuwah is talking through the prophet Micah, Micha in Hebrew, that through the words that he was speaking, through Balaam, he was revealing his righteousness to Israel. And you know, it's just a matter to read the entire words of Balaam. And there's one specifically that caught my attention. And this is written in the chapter 24 of Numbers. Chapter 24 of Numbers, verse 9. And this is really interesting because in all the previous occasions, opportunities, Balaam was using sorcery. This is what is written. But in this specific occasion, if we read in the verse 1 of chapter 24, he understood that Yahuwah wanted to bless Israel, so he stopped using sorcery. And the Ruach of Elohim came upon him. It is written in the verse 2. So after the Ruach of Elohim came upon him, he was saying in the verse 9, he bowed down, he lay down like a lion. This is the blessing that he was giving to Israel. And like a lion, who would rouse him? And listen to this, blessed is he who blesses you, and cursed is he who curses you. So according to the prophecy of Micah, Yahuwah is revealing his righteousness through the words of Balaam. And one of these is basically a blessing for Israel, it's a blessing for you and me, is that blessed is he who blesses us, and cursed is he who curses us. Who received a similar blessing? Was Abraham. Abraham was receiving exactly the same blessing. And we see this in the book of Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. And it says, and I shall bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. So we see how Yahuwah is so righteous that he is keeping the same promises and the same covenant that he made with Abraham, with second generation of Israel, giving them exactly the same blessing that he gave to Abraham. And thus that blessing is for you and me, is still true for you and me. Just to finish, you know, I want to share two passages that came to me. And I think it's just to connect it to what I just shared. One of them is in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 7, verse 21. And I think it's so applicable to our days. It says the following, and this is Yahuwah, keep it as Yahuwah speaking to you, speaking to me. It says, do not be afraid of them. For Yahuwah, your Elohim, the great and awesome El, is in your midst. In the same way that Yahuwah was in the midst of that second generation of Israel is in our midst, and we should not be afraid. And the second passage is in the book of James, Jacob in Hebrew, chapter 4, verse 7. And this is something that is so true. Unfortunately, that second generation with the matter of Peor, not all of them follow this advice, but we need to follow. We need to follow this advice. And it says, so then subject yourselves to Elohim, resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. So what it means to subject ourselves to Elohim, to be obedient to Elohim, to be obedient to his word. If we do that, in the same way that Yahushua HaMashiach, when he was tempted in the wilderness, and he held fast himself to the word of Yahuwah, and he was fighting back and pushing back the devil, Satan, using the word of Yahuwah, is in the same way that we need to do it. We need to hold fast to the word of Yahuwah. We need to be obedient to the word of Yahuwah, because in that way, we are not going to be afraid. No matter that we go through persecution, we are not going to be afraid. Yahuwah will open our eyes to see that his army is beside us, that he will be with us and he will bless us. So, guys, this is what I had to share. This is what I got in my heart today when I was reading the portion. And thank you for letting me share it.
Yeah, man, real good stuff. Excellent. It's with regard to the opening the eyes deal. That's a hard lesson. It's something, because we get passionate about whatever it is we're trying to convey. Especially as content producers, I think all three of us can relate to that, where we're producing stuff on YouTube or sharing stuff on Facebook, and we want people to get it, but they're fighting you left and right, and it's like it's a trap, man, where you're trying to just spend weeks defending whatever it is that you are sharing with people whose eyes are shut, that don't want to see. There was a meme going around. Let me see if I can pull it up. I actually pinned it to my Facebook page, so it's a reminder to me every time I go there. It's the first thing I see. It's like at the top of my page now. It's right here. Noah didn't stop building the ark to explain himself to everyone who doubted and hated on him. Keep building your ark. The rain will do the talking. Yeah, that's a good word. One that I'm like, all right, just share whatever it is that you're supposed to be sharing. The truth will speak for itself. In this case, Noah's talking, nobody's listening. He's like, well, the rain's going to, the rain will do all the talking. It will certainly open the eyes when the time comes. Right. So, yeah, it's a good word, man. There was a movie that came out back in the 80s called They Live. It was kind of a cheesy B movie, but there's a scene in the movie where, interestingly enough, the main character, who is played by Roddy Piper, the wrestler, he gets these glasses that enable him to see what's really going on. And in the context of the movie, it's the world's been taken over by aliens, but nobody can see them, and they've got propaganda everywhere, but nobody can see it unless you have these special glasses. And incidentally, he finds the glasses in a church. He finds a box of glasses in a church, and he puts them on so he can see what's really happening, but nobody else can. And he's trying to get his best friend to put the glasses on. And there's like this 10-minute fist fight in the movie. It just keeps going on and on and on and on. And Sheila's sitting there watching it with me, and she's like, "This is stupid. This is ridiculous. Come on, this is just so." I'm like, "Yeah, but look at the allegory. Look what's being said here. All he wants his friend to do is put the glasses on." And there's a 10-minute fight because the guy refuses to do this simple thing, simply put the glasses on. And then after they beat the snot out of each other, he finally gets it. I think he actually puts the glasses on the guy. It's like, here, he puts them on when they're all like all bloody and everything. And he's like, whoa. And he's like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to show you, man. That's like every day for me on social media. Because, I'm just trying to get people to put the glasses on, and everybody's fighting you. But you know what, unless their eyes are open, you're beating your head against the wall. And it's only taken me 10-12 years in social media to figure this out. But like this month it has and it came actually as a result of being banned. I got banned from Facebook for 30 days. So they say it takes 21 days to develop a habit, right? I was able to develop a habit of being weaned off of social media, which was great because I got a ton of work done. So it's a good habit, actually, Rob. Yeah, man, it was a good thing for me. So I spend very little time there now, and I'm just getting to the point where, you know what, fine, I said what I need to say. I'm not going to spend all week defending it. Their eyes have to be open. Yeah, that's true. Even if it takes a talking donkey. Even if it takes a donkey, that's true. Or almost a horse talking. Yeah. Talking horse. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good stuff, man. We got about 15 minutes left. If either of you have any more closing thoughts you'd like to share.
Good stuff.
No, from my side.
Good.
Nope. Everybody's good. Okay, cool. The only other thought that I had is that verse, bless Israel, be blessed, curse Israel, be cursed, I think is being, it's a manipulative scripture that political Zionists have used for decades to influence Christians to support things that we really shouldn't be supporting. I think that when it comes to that verse, yes, Yahuwah, and especially, it starts with the blessing of Abraham, right? As you pointed out in Genesis chapter 12. And that specific blessing was to Abraham. I will bless those that bless you, Abram, and curse those who curse you, Abram. But later we see that Balaam realizes that this blessing extended to his offspring, right? And he's like, every time I try to curse them, I end up blessing them, So that begs the question for us today, then, who is Israel? Who is true Israel? Bless Israel, be blessed, curse Israel, be cursed. Great, but who is Israel? I am personally of the opinion that it's not the political Zionist state in the Middle East that I should be concerned with. It's the body of Yeshua. It is the cultivated olive tree of Romans chapter 7 through 11. And you need to read the entire book of Hosea to understand what Paul is saying in Romans, because he's quoting Hosea directly in that passage, Romans chapter 7 through 11 specifically. So, for me, blessing Israel is blessing the cultivated olive tree, not a geopolitical Zionist, Illuminati, Rosicrucian, Freemasonic, Rothschild state blessed by the United Nations. That's my opinion on that. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I think definitely dispensational theology has really done a lot along the lines of kind of justifying the nation state as Israel, and definitely here I think it's Balaam that it's interesting to me that he's the one that often anti-missionaries will quote. Because one of the things he says is Yehovah is not the son of man that he should do such and such. So Balaam is one, he's often quoted by anti-missionaries. Even people in the land of Israel use some of these texts to go against people who believe on Yeshua as the Messiah. But I think that's a telltale thing that we have to recognize, that it's those who keep the commandments and are grafted in that are Israel. It's not just the people that either claim blood, relative. I mean, there's people that can make aliyah to Israel today that don't even have to be practicing Judaism. But it is a requirement when somebody wants to immigrate to the land of Israel that you have to make a confession that you have not and do not believe Yeshua is the Messiah. And this is part of the official process of somebody immigrating to Israel. So it's pretty much a state that is growing out of people that are making an outward confession that they don't believe Yeshua is the Messiah. And if he's the way, the truth, and the life, if he's the way that people are reconciled back to a perfect God, imperfect men are reconciled back to a perfect creator, right? And it's through him and his example that we learn how to walk out. That's why we would want to keep the Torah, keep the commandments, is because he's our example. Then they're creating a nation that is drawing people in that are all making an outward profession to have never believed or not believing in Yeshua as the Messiah. So to me, it's actually a location of a growing concentration of people that are not Israel, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just to complement what you say, Jake and Rob, I think we are talking about the establishment today, the government, the country called Israel. We're not talking about the land. The land we know that this is part of the promise, it's part of what is written and so on. But the establishment today that they call that same Israel is what we're talking about. And, for me, it's similar to what was happening in the first century. There was a people called Israel that were dominated by the Romans, with a fake government being conducted by Herods and the Edomites. And the same thing is happening today. But there was a mixture, exactly as you said, Jake, in the land. People from Yahuwah, people from the house of Yehuda, with the people from other nations and paganism and idolatry is exactly what's going on today. And in that way, Rob, I fully agree with what you said. Israel, according to the scripture, is the 12 tribes. Mm-hmm. And the nation of Israel has not been gathered together. And we are waiting for this promise in Ezekiel chapter 37 that the Mashiach is going to gather the two trees, the two sticks, and they are going to create only one tree, one stick. And that's going to be the nation of Israel. So I haven't, and that's my current take on the situation. I do believe that the part of the house of Yehuda has been coming back to the land. But that doesn't mean that this is Israel. Israel is the 12 tribes of Israel, according to the word.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody in the chat room was saying, how come, why do I constantly, rail on this issue? Because I think it's an important issue. If you look at every single prophetic scripture regarding the regathering of Israel, it consistently says, Yod He Vav He, Yahuwah is going to do it. And he's going to do it in a fashion that's going to make the exodus of Moses pale in comparison. It's a greater exodus. And it's in a post-tribulation context. I mean, people always quote Isaiah 66:8. Can a nation be born in a day? Yep, May 14th, 1948. Nope, sorry. Chapter 65, which precedes 66:8, the context is in a millennial reign context. It's when the wolf lays down with the lamb, and a person dies at 100 years of age is considered a child. Has that happened yet? No. And it says 4 verses later that Israel peaceful will flow like a river in Isaiah 66:12. Well, we've had anything but peace since 1948. So I don't want to spend the rest of the show talking about that because we've talked about it at length in many other shows, but there are just too many reasons why 1948 in no way, shape, or form, at least in my mind, fits any of the usual suspects, the scriptures that are typically used to try to justify it. And this is a book right here that I recommend people check out. It's called The Redeemed by Todd D. Bennett. And he gets into this in quite a bit of detail, and this book's available on the Virtual House Church website. So I think it's on the Coming Out of Babylon page, probably, where I've got his whole series. Have you guys ever read any of his books, the Walk in the Light series by Todd Bennett?
No.
Man, they're good. They are really, really good stuff. So anyway, that's my take on it. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the show, it looks like here, unless you guys have any remaining thoughts that you wanted to share.
Yeah, there are two things that I just saw in my notes here that maybe is worth to mention it. When we see one of the blessings being given by Yahuwah through Balaam, one of them, I think is in the chapter 23:14, was from the top of Pisgah. It was the top of the mountain called Pisgah. And it caught my attention. I have this from last year because it was from the same place that Moshe was brought to the top of Pisgah, to Mount Nebo. And it's written in Deuteronomy chapter 34. It was it's part of the top of Pisgah to see the promised land. So to see the connection that, Israel was getting some promises and blessings from the same place that Moses was able to see the promised land, for me, it's not a coincidence. I found it really interesting. And the second thing, and then this is for a long discussion, not to have it now, but we see again the angel of and the messengers of Yahuwah, in Hebrew is Malach Yahuwah. And clearly in this portion, we see that the Malach Yahuwah is Yahuwah himself. We see how the Malach Yahuwah, the angel, the messenger of Yahuwah, is speaking as Yahuwah. And this is something that we discussed in previous broadcasts as an important topic to study in details, just to understand the figure, the Malach Yahuwah, and the connection with Yahuwah and Yahushua HaMashiach. That's it.
Yeah, very good. Somebody in the chat room said, I feel the whole earth could be Israel, the people. Yeah, I agree. I think that this was sort of a Sheila, my wife, calls it Operation Leverage, right? Where we see in I think it's Ezekiel 4, where the prophet's told to lay on his side for 390 days, a day for a year. that the punishment of the northern kingdom would be 390 years. But we see in Leviticus, I believe it's 26, I think, that when Yahuwah chastises you, if you don't learn your lesson in your time of chastisement, then you get 7 times more of the judgment. Well, there's no indication that the northern kingdom repented like Judah did. When Judah was sent to Babylon for 70 years, well, they repented. They get to go back in. No indication that the northern kingdom repented. So they, according to scripture, appear to have received 7 times the judgment. So 7 times 390, 2,730 years. That, if that assumption is true, and I've come to believe that it is, I think it's a valid assumption, then the sentence that Israel was given, the northern kingdom, ended in roughly 2009, 2010 timeframe. And that's when there was this explosion of what I refer to as the Ephraim awakening. All those blue dots that I showed at the beginning of the broadcast on the map started to pop up all over the world. There's no religion, no, denomination, no leader that led that. That was 100% Holy Spirit led, people just all over the world waking up, and I liken it to the parable of the prodigal son waking up in the pig pen. And that's what the story is about. The parable of the prodigal son is a story about the northern and southern kingdom. And he wakes up in the pig pen and is like, man, what did I do? What did I get myself into? He repents and says, man, I wonder if dad will take me back. And he heads back. I believe that, and that's why I call it the Ephraim awakening. If you could take a Polaroid snapshot of that moment in the pig pen, right when he says, I wonder if dad will take me back, that's what I refer to as the Ephraim awakening. I believe that happened in 2009, 2010 timeframe. And so this is the season when I think Israel's going to start to be regathered, probably, in a not too distant future. But Operation Leverage, what is that? Well, let me just go back to the Virtual House Church page website and go to the Torah Fellowship page. This is it right here. And this is Operation Leverage, right? So the northern kingdom, what happened to them? They got dispersed. The prophets say that they were sifted into all nations. So they're everywhere. Israel's everywhere. It's not a tiny little sliver of land about the size of New Jersey that everybody's fighting about in the Middle East. This is Ephraim, the northern kingdom, known as Israel, known as Ephraim, is waking up, and Yahuwah has sifted them into all the nations, and now he's going to pull them out. This is why it's going to be a greater exodus, because it's not just pulling a people out of Egypt into the land of Canaan. It's pulling people from all over the world back to wherever he wants to set up shop, presumably in the plot of land we now call Israel over there, and the New Jerusalem comes down. I believe it's going to come down and park on top of the old Jerusalem, frankly, after everything gets burned up. So this is Israel right here. Bless Israel, curse Israel. That's this, in my opinion. That is the way I understand it. And so I believe that there are plenty of those people that are of both houses, if you will, the northern house of Ephraim, Israel, and the southern, that are living in that plot of land we call Israel today. So I'm not against the people. I'm against the geopolitical state that has been used to manipulate people all over the world. I think Israel is everywhere that we have been sifted. And if you are a believer in Yeshua, then you have been grafted into the cultivated olive tree, and it doesn't matter where you live. You are Israel where you are right now. Where you're sitting right now, you are a representative of Israel today, right now. So I say blessings to you. Blessings to you. Bless Israel, right? That's how we're going to close out this broadcast with the Aaronic blessing over Israel, right? So let me go to, there we go. I got it up on YouTube here. Let me switch over.
יברכך יחוה וישמרך Yahuwah amar lecha ve'yaseh lecha shalom. Yahuwah amar lecha ve'yaseh lecha shalom. Ve'yaseh lecha shalom. Ve'yaseh lecha shalom. Yahuwah bless you and keep you. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Yahuwah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Awesome. And Juan Carlos, if you would bless Israel for us in Spanish, that'd be great.
Sure. It says, Yahuwah te bendiga y te guarde. Yahuwah haga resplandecer su rostro sobre ti y tenga de ti compasión. Yahuwah alce sobre ti su rostro y te dé paz. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. And with that, we say Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat, the Hebrew word for Sabbath, and Shalom, peace. Blessings to you, Israel. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. See you back next week.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.